appreciate those scriptures tonight. Let's go to Lamentations chapter 4 together this evening. My plan is to cover chapter 4 tonight, and then next week to finish up with chapter 5. One helpful way to study the Bible is to not only notice what's there, but notice what's not there, because we can learn by what's not there too. And the fact that it's missing gives us principles and truths that we can carry with us. And I want you to know some things that aren't found here in the book of Lamentations, all right? Number one, there's no removal of their pain. All the destruction that Jeremiah sees remains. Now, if you remember, chapter 3 was the chapter of repentance. Chapter 3 was the chapter of recognizing God's sovereignty. Chapter 3 was the chapter where they said, "Great is thy faithfulness." Chapter 3 is the chapter where they said that your mercies are new every morning. I mean, chapter 3 was that chapter where it seems like everything came together and everything seemed to be right. But in chapter 4, it's still the same. The pain is still there. The hurt is still there. Not every question is answered. I mean, in the book of Lamentations, we're not given every answer to every question that we could possibly pose. But God doesn't have to answer every question. He's allowed to not answer them. You'll also not find in the book of Lamentations, you won't find it sort of becoming all tidy and clean. Because, to be honest, chapter 4 probably has some of the most graphic of the hurt that Judah has experienced. That's found in chapter number 4. And so it's not really clean and neat. It's not a where everything comes sort of like gathered together in one place, and now it's all neat and organized, and it's still sort of messy in chapter 4. Things don't get comfortable. We would sort of in our human nature say, well, they've repented, they've confessed these great truths, at least Jeremiah has, in his process of lamenting what he sees after Babylon came in and destroyed the city and nation and people. So you'd think that now there'd be some comfort, and it really seems from chapter 3 that Jeremiah is still pretty uncomfortable. And so this is what we take away from what's not there. What we take away from what's not there is that life doesn't always, repentance doesn't always remove pain. And an acknowledging of God's truth doesn't always make us completely comfortable again. And things don't always become tidy. Sometimes things remain messy, and not every question will be answered. I'm talking about in your story. Not every question may be answered. Jerusalem was not suddenly rebuilt. It's not as though after chapter 3, which was, what a tremendous chapter 3 was. It's not like all of a sudden the walls started to come back together and block upon block, and there was the city back. No, it remained in smoking ruins. It stayed like that. And loved ones didn't come back to life. Many of them watched their family members die, and they didn't come back. And the children who were hungry didn't instantly find food. They stayed hungry. I had someone say to me a few weeks ago, and they said, well, this process is not linear. And I'm never afraid to ask. I said, I don't know what you mean by it not being linear. And so he explained himself. He said, well, linear just means that it's sort of predictable. Like if you were to draw a line if you were to draw a straight line, you can predict where the line will go because it's straight, right? Like if you drew a straight line, sort of has a predictability about what will be coming up on the next place. But life isn't always linear like that. Life is sort of like this. Doesn't go in a straight line all the time. And life is unpredictable. And we don't always get the blessing of seeing what the next step will hold, or how this will all come together, or how this will all make sense, or how the recovery will happen. Their recovery was going to be very slow, but Jeremiah's hope was in the end. And the entire nation, their hope was in the end. We're coming up with this graduation season for many. And probably one of the most used graduation scriptures or text is found in the book of Jeremiah. For thus saith the Lord, that after 70 years be accomplished at Babylon, I will visit you and perform my goodwill towards you, and causing you to return to this place. Now here's the scripture that many use. For I know the thoughts that I think towards you, saith the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected, and you all know the last word? Expected end. There's no way that we can expect or have an expected line. God's not going to show you the line, but you can have an expected end. And that was really the hope that Jeremiah had, that God had said after 70 years, this will all resolve. After 70 years, this will all come back. After 70 years, I'll bring the nation back. After 70 years, there will be a rebuild. But through all of that, Jeremiah could not see ahead of time what he witnessed here in the book of Lamentations. Who would have expected that? Chapter number 4 chronicles the realities of the continued consequence of their sin, and the consequences were well calculated by God. They were not just it was not just an explosion. God doesn't work that way. He does not just drop a bomb and then there's carnage. I mean, God works in a meticulous, calculated way. Sort of like a surgeon. A good surgeon with a scalpel will work in a way that is pre-planned and pre-thought through, and yes, it's going to hurt, and yes, there's going to be some pain, and there'll be some recovery, but the surgeon works in a methodical way for an expected end. And God knew that there were certain things that Israel and Jerusalem and Judah, they had placed their trust in things they should have never placed their trust in. And that's the premise that I want us to sort of spring off of tonight. They had placed their trust in things and people in which they should have never placed their trust. So I want to ask you this. God knew that they had put their trust in things they shouldn't. So how is God going to change that? Let's put it this way. Parents, when you're teaching your children how to ride a bike, and they're really trusting those training wheels, how are you going to make them not trust the training wheels anymore? You got to take them off. Right? Because no matter how much you tell them, oh, hey, just ride normal. See, I can just ride normal. You don't need those training wheels. Unless you take them off, they're going to go on each wheel, and they're going to get bent up more and more on the sides. But when you remove them, now they can't trust them anymore. And here's something that God really hammered home for me. What God did for Israel and for Judah was not just, of course, it was the anger of the Lord, and they had been rebellious, and they had been adulterous. And just to sort of make it easier in our minds, we may say, well, all the things that Jerusalem suffered, it seems so drastic. Well, adultery is a pretty bad thing. It's like someone saying, she's mad because he was unfaithful. Yeah. He's mad because she was unfaithful? Absolutely. I mean, the anger of the Lord is justified, completely justified, because there was a covenant between God and his people, and they had broke that covenant. And so God's anger was justified, but his dealing with the nation was very much calculated and very much well thought out. So he is stripping away. What we're going to see in the book of this chapter number 4 is that he is stripping away those things. And Jeremiah sees it. He's taking away those things that the nation had begun to trust, and those things that they had begun to trust are not trustworthy. So God took them away and put them through pain. But the pain would position them once again to find the solid foundation. That's what the pain was going to do. The pain was going to push them to the place where they could rely upon God again. And so we'll read here in our text, there's really 3 things that God stripped away. And honestly, I saw so many signs in how God dealt with them, and I believe how God's dealing with our country, because we are trusting the wrong things as America. We are trusting the wrong things. So let's just read. I want to get our eyes on the Word of God again tonight. So chapter number 4, verse number 1. How is the gold become dim? And look at the exclamation point there. How has the gold become dim? How is the most fine gold changed? The stones of the sanctuary are poured out in the top of every street. The precious sons of Zion, comparable to fine gold, how are they esteemed as earthen pitchers, the work of the hands of the potter? Even the sea monsters draw out the breast. They give suck to their young ones. The daughter of my people has become cruel, like ostriches in the wilderness. The tongue of the suckling child cleaveth to the roof of his mouth for thirst. The young children ask bread, and no man breaketh it unto them. Here's the first thing that God had to take care of for the nation, is he degraded their culture. He degraded their culture. The references to gold and the references to gold becoming dim is sort of explained in verse number 2, where it says the precious sons of Zion are comparable to fine gold. Here was Jerusalem. Here was Israel. This was the nation that, as far as the world was concerned, this was the jewel of the earth. Am I right? Israel was the jewel of the earth. This was God's nation. This was God's people. And here's what had happened. They had become pretty proud of that. And pretty dependent upon, well, we are Israel. And we have certain histories, and we have certain legacies, and we have certain dynasties, and we have certain things that have, and the promises of God are what we have to cling to. And they were very much proud of who they were. And God wiped it all away. Really wiped it all away. They said, our sons, we used to compare them to fine gold, and now they're just clay pots. You know, they used to be something we cherished, and now it's just earthen vessels. Well, when they used to have confidence in the family and the families of Israel and the young men and the strong young men and the strength of the youth of the nation, and then even the fine things that they enjoyed. Look at verse number 5. They that did feed delicately. Now listen, they were delicate eaters. They had the finest things. We did feed delicately are desolate in the streets. They that were brought up in scarlet embraced dunghills. For the punishment of the iniquity of the daughter of my people is greater than the punishment of the sin of Sodom, that was overthrown as in a moment, and no hands stayed on her. The city no longer gleams. The nation no longer shines. The people no longer are the spectacle that the world says, wow, aren't they great? Wow, isn't that wonderful? Wow, isn't that amazing? Look at that nation. Remember the Queen of Sheba came to see Solomon? The half has not been told. This nation is amazing. This king is awesome. And the people are so great. And look at that temple. And the entire world stood in awe of Israel. And now they laugh. As if God said, you're trusting your culture as being a nation and putting pride in who you think you are. I can take all that away just like that. And God did. He degraded their culture. They lost their elevated status in the world. They had enjoyed this top tier for so long, and now it has been stripped away, and they're at the bottom. Their present reality is much different than the past. In the past, we would call it the glory days. Man, the glory days of Israel. You know where they went? They're gone. And who took them away? God took them away. And I'll tell you why. Because they were trusting them. Because that's where their confidence was lying. The reference to Sodom in verse number 6, they say that, well, the punishment of Sodom was an easier punishment than what we got. Now, how can that be? How can the punishment of Sodom, and some of you, we know the Bible, the punishment of Sodom, how can that be easier punishment than what we got? And the way that it's mentioned here is that at least they were overthrown in a moment. At least their suffering was instant. And Israel's saying our suffering is like long term. You know, this drawn out thing. God was degrading their culture. Their princes have lost their elevated lifestyle. All of the finer things in life that they enjoyed are just gone. In verse number 7, her Nazarites were purer than snow. They were whiter than milk. They were more ruddy in body than rubies. Their polishing was of sapphire. It's saying, you know, the wealthy people and the people that were of high elite in Israel, man, they looked great, they dressed great, they smelled great, they were great. Look at verse 8. Now their vishes is blacker than coal. They are not known in the streets. Their skin cleaveth to their bones. It is withered, it has become like a stick. You know, the elite and the leaders of Israel used to have full faces and ate so well and everything was just great. Now they're skin and bones, blackened skin. No one hardly recognizes the wealthy of Israel anymore because they've been ravaged by hunger and thirst. And it's become so bad. And I want to, we're going to read it tonight. Look at verse number 10, how bad it is. Let's just read it. I don't want to give comments on it. The hands of the pitiful women have sodden their own children. They were their meat in the destruction of the daughter of my people. Now, there were some commentators I read that said that that was a metaphor, that just saying that the mothers actually, caused harm to their kids. But, I mean, if you read it literal, it means they ate their children. And here was a culture that had the finest of things and a temple that was the admiration of the world. Such great histories like David and Solomon, and now it's just gone. Their culture is zero. Everything's vanished. Say, why would God do that? Well, it was his discipline, but God was doing that because they were trusting in that. Now I want to say, I think America's culture is starting to unravel. And it's been unraveling for a while. We can all think back to times when things were different, right? And let me carefully say this. I'm not as old as some here, but I can think back to times when they were a lot better in America. When America was a better place. When America was a more admirable nation. And there's part of her glory that is falling away, at least in my eyes. Part of her glory is falling away. And especially during this virus, we can see, now look, sin has always been present in America. Sin was always present in Israel. And I realize that America has never been a perfect nation, but the sin is getting worse in America. And so God may be saying even today, well, I'll strip your culture away. You trust that culture? You think it's the greatest thing? Here's what I wrote in my notes. Stadiums and arenas are empty. I mean, that's sort of become the culture of America, right? Go watch a sporting event, 80,000 go here, 50,000 go here. The Progressive Field is packed out, and Major League Baseball, and get your hot dog, and go get some nachos. And they're all empty. The whole country. The theaters and the stages are quiet, right? All quiet. Sarah told me this today, and it really surprised me. We're running out of ground beef. She's told me that Wendy's, right, doesn't have ground beef, right? Or some of them. Who would have thought in America we'd be out of ground beef? Or coming close to out of ground beef? It's as if God is saying, you trust that culture too much, I can take it away fast. Strip you of your culture. What you believe to be the thing that will keep you get you through hard times, what you believe it is that will make ends meet for you. The airplanes are grounded across the country. There's a few airplanes going here and there, but not many. The resorts and the vacation spots are bare, empty, right? I'm talking about this is America's culture. We go on vacation, and we travel, and we see the sights, and we go places, and we enjoy the beach, and we go climb the mountains, and we go where the beauty is, and they're empty. They're empty. Disneyland's even closed its gates. And for them to close the gates, you know it's something, right? I'm just saying, when you see all this happen, it is as if God is saying, you trust that culture, I'll take it away just like that. And I don't want to be a nation that trusts that. It's not what makes America great. America's not great because she has good theater and good sports and good amusement parks, and we're not great because we have cattle in the fields and cheap chicken we can use for our barbecues. That's not what makes America great. And I think it's time for us to realize that and get back to understanding God makes America great. Or God will take away our culture completely. And this is more personal for me. And I had to sort of put myself in check. My opinion is what makes America great is her freedoms. And God's sort of taken that away from us. Oh, we are the free country in the world. We are the beacon of freedom. Well, you want to trust that? I'll take that away too, God says. God was chastening Israel by removing her culture. Here's another thing we got to hurry through tonight. It's already, I shouldn't even tell you, it's 8 o'clock already. Chapter 4 and verse 12. He was discrediting their leadership. Let me just read verse 13 just for sake of time. For the sins of her prophets and the iniquities of her priests, they have shed the blood of the just in the midst of her. They have wandered as blind men in the streets. The leaders of Israel were an embarrassment now. Prior to Babylon coming in, everybody thought, oh man, they got priests and they got prophets and they got spiritual leaders there and they got this whole religious system set up in Israel and they've got the temple worship going on and the entire world looked at Israel as being, and even the nation itself, well, we got prophets and Jeremiah, he's wacko, but we got these other guys who say the right things, we got good kings. And at this point, they look at their leaders as being an embarrassment. And here's why their leaders were an embarrassment. Their kings, their princes, their priests, and their prophets, they failed to teach rightly. They gave false messages of safety and welfare. They did not decry sinful practices, but rather participated in them. They did not warn of the wages of sin. And through all the time leading up to the captivity, they were all loving their leaders. Well, we got good prophets, and we got good priests, and Jeremiah, he's sort of crazy, but these other ones are great. We got good kings, and we'll set up another one. And now they're an embarrassment. Look how they're described, these prophets and priests that they once praised. Verse 14 says they have wandered as blind men in the streets. Oh, your big prophets and priests, they're wandering around like they can't even see nothing. They have polluted themselves with blood so that men could not touch their garments. Verse 15, they cried unto them, depart ye, it is unclean, depart ye, depart, touch not. When they fled away and wandered, they said among the heathen, they shall no more sojourn there. The nation finally realized how woefully false and evil and the lying practices of their leaders. And these were the leaders that they chose and loved at the beginning, and now they're the leaders that the nation says, get out of here, we don't want to see you. Because you know what happened? Every time a Jew saw one of those false prophets who lied to him all the way through, it disgusted them. Disgusting. Lied to us the whole time. Telling us things that made us feel good but weren't the truth. Not teaching us the right. And now they're the offscouring of the nation. They're disgusted by their leaders. Well, that's because they were trusting their leaders too much and not trusting the Lord. America has leadership. And the older I get, the more I realize how corrupt and inept so much of our leadership is. Dirty politics is a phrase that has become commonplace. Right? Dirty politics is what happens here in America. And for our leaders, often lies are expected and results are not expected. And it's quickly coming to the point in America where we're disgusted with our leaders, and it may be that God is saying, why are you trusting them anyways? Trust me. Trust me. And then very quickly as I close, that they were dropped by their allies and friends. Look at verse number 17. As for us, our eyes as yet failed. Now notice this phrase in verse 17, for our vain help. Our vain help. In our watching, we have watched for a nation that could not save us. Now, we've studied Jeremiah, and some of you know. What was the nation that Israel thought would save them? Egypt. Well, Egypt, they're our friend. And Egypt's going to come through at just the right time. And Babylon may come in here, and Nebuchadnezzar may try to throw his weight around. But we got Egypt in our back pocket, and Egypt's in our corner. And surely when Nebuchadnezzar comes in here, we'll together with Egypt, we're just going to. And when they came, where was Egypt? No show. Nowhere to be found. Yeah, sleeping. Good luck, Israel. Good luck. Hope it all goes well. Then there was another nation, Edom, in verse 21. Rejoice and be glad, O daughter of Edom, that dwellest in the land of Uz. The cup also shall pass through unto thee. Thou shalt be drunken and shalt make thyself naked. Egypt was a disappointment. And God had warned Israel not to put their trust in Egypt. God had warned Israel not to put their trust in other nations. God had told them to put their trust in him, but they trusted in Egypt. And then Edom, who was, by the way, Edom was of close family. Edom was the nation descendant of Esau, Jacob and Esau. And you'd think that like a cousin nation would come help you. I mean, Egypt, we're in no relation to Egypt, but I mean, like Edom, that's Esau. They'll surely come help us. And we don't have time to go over there to Psalms 137, but you can read through Psalms 137, and Edom encouraged Babylon, go get them. In fact, the word there is raise it, R-A-S-E, which means just lay it bare, just strip it down, just take it down to the nothing. That's what Edom was saying. And so here is a nation who thought they had friends, who thought they had allies. And you know what that reminded me of? We're coming to the end of the chapter here. It reminded me of that prodigal son, right? The story of the prodigal son. And when he had money, he had lots of friends, right? I'm going to make merry with my friends. And so he got the money from dad, went out into the far country, and had a lot of party with the friends until the money's gone. And friends were not there. So much more to say, but our time is gone. I wonder if God isn't stripping away some things that America's been trusting for too long. You trust your way of life. You trust in your political system. You trust in your food process, your food transport industry. You're trusting in all the cattle that you think you got on the hillside, and you're trusting in the wealth that you think you have, and you're trusting in the ability that you have to make your money, and you've got friends, and you got the League of Nations, you got United Nations, you got all of this. You think you're going to trust in it? And I believe the Lord may be saying to us, even as a country, as he was dealing with Israel, don't trust anyone or anything but me. I pray that America will trust God. I know this is a strange time today. We don't have time to say much about this. I think we trust our medical system too much. We got great doctors, great hospitals, right? Even here in our area, Cleveland Clinic and University. Could it be that America says, well, we'll be fine. We got good doctors, good hospitals. We got lots of medicine. We got pharmacies. we got a Walgreens or a CVS on every corner in every town. We'll always be able to get what we need. And God may say, well, let's see about that. When you have nothing, will you trust me again? Now, here's the good news. It worked. It worked for Israel. Because when they came down to having nothing, they came back to God again. And I remember look, some of you have been a Christian much longer than I have. We've heard the old preachers say this down through the years. Sometimes God has to take us to nothing before we'll turn back to him. And I don't know, I believe this is somewhat of a judgment upon America, but even if it is, it seems like a light one, right? Seems like a light judgment. What if God really got heavy with judgment on our country? God really put his heavy hand upon us as a nation. Because here's the honest truth. Most of America had several $1,000s put in their bank account a few weeks back. Things are still going pretty good, right? But Israel, this last illustration, Israel, right before coming in, Babylon came in, I pictured Israel with two crutches. And Israel, which once was a strong nation, I mean, they were a mighty nation, trusting God, working, living for God, a beacon of light to the entire world. And then slowly they started to do their own thing, right? Slowly they started to rebel from God and worship idols and all of that. And now they're still hobbling along with these crutches. And they think that, oh, these crutches are good. It's keeping me up. These crutches are good. They're sort of, I'm able to still walk. Look, we're still walking as a country. You know what happened? God kicked all the crutches out. And it sort of sounds mean. But God kicked the crutch of their culture out. God kicked the crutch of their allies out. God kicked all these crutches out, and you know what happened? They collapsed. You say, oh, so sad. It was the best thing that happened to the nation. Because when they collapsed and had no place else to go, they turned back to God, and God restored them. And I don't want to be a doom and gloom preacher. But whatever it takes for America to trust God completely, I want it. I want it. I had a preacher say to me this week, he said, he's a local pastor here too. He said they lost their church building. I said, oh, that's so sad. He said, no, it's the greatest thing that happened to us. I said, what do you mean it's the greatest thing that happened to you? He said, we've never been exercising more faith than ever than what we're doing right now. And I thought about that and I said, you're right. You're right. Lord, help us to trust God completely with everything. Can we just bow our heads for a moment of prayer tonight?